What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to episode 74 of To the Show We Go. I am solo today. No Ed Hand, no Chris Henrique, no Jamie Gatlin. Just me today. So you're stuck with me, and I have one of our tied for first favorite broadcasters in Worcester. We had Tyler Murray on in a previous episode. And we kind of talked about a little bit of the off season, a little, before the season started. So today I am joined by Jim Cain, who is also a broadcaster for the Worcester Red Sox. He does a lot of TV, and then you can catch him on the radio too when on the road, which I did tune in and the opening series. So Jim, that's actually where I want to start. You just got back from Lehigh Valley, a nice bus ride back home. I guess, how was it just from your side of things before we get to the on-field talk?
Yeah, it's always great to get going, right? There's so much buildup, there's so much anticipation. You and I were just at media day last week, and that's really kind of the start of it, right? And then a few days later, we're finally playing meaningful baseball games, and I always look forward to it. A clean slate, brand new team, you get to meet a bunch of new faces, which there are a lot of new faces on this year's team. And as is the same with basically every minor league season, you're going to see a lot of names throughout the course of the year, at least if history continues to repeat itself with this franchise, where they continue to just set records and break previous year records in terms of player transactions and players used in a season. So, but, personally, I love it. And it's funny, my wife just asked me a few minutes ago, uh, did it take you a while to, dust off the cobwebs off the vocal cords or whatever? And I said, it did for a couple of innings, but then once the third, fourth rolled around on Friday night, it was like we never left, and we were right back into it. So it's good to get going.
I will say that I am always impressed when I talk to you, Tyler, even Cooper, Mike, Jay, all of you guys, and it is funny that like you talk to you guys like, I guess, eating before a game or something, or just like down in Tracy's office or whatever. And you guys like still sound the exact same you do when you're on air compared to off air. And I'm like, they just like, that's just how they are. They're born with it. So I always, I'm very jealous that you guys are gifted with that. But um, I want to dive into the first series. You were on the road. You were calling games in Lehigh Valley. Um, I was listening to the call on Friday night, and I think that was one of the first times. I know you weren't speechless, but you were almost. I think I remember you word for it saying like, "I don't even know what to say." So, how was opening weekend though? Just like in regards to the games.
Yeah, honestly, I think the games were great. I thought they were very compelling. I thought it was a very entertaining series because you really had two teams that were in the thick of the second half playoff push in the IL before Durham ran away with the second half title and faced Norfolk, and we all know what happened after that. But it was Worcester and it was Lehigh Valley, and they were like the 2, 3 teams in the periphery of the second half standings in the IL. And what was interesting about Lehigh is that a lot of their position players were returners, at least on the opening day roster and what we saw this past weekend. So you had guys like Cody Clemens, Derek Hall, Weston Wilson, who had the first 30-30 season in Iron Pigs history. That was the top 3 in the order all weekend. And those are their best players last year, so they're back this year. So it was really a good test to see what this new mix and collection of WooSox players would do and see what they would look like. And I mean, the pitching was phenomenal. I know Tyler is really high on the bullpen. Besides Friday night and the ninth inning, that was, it. I think the way I put it in our post game show was that if you were to tell me that the Woo Sox would have the lead on opening night in the bottom of the ninth inning, and the final 2 pitchers of the game would be Joe Jakes and AJ Politi, you'd say, lock it down, shut the door. I mean, game's over, right? So it's just so fluky what we saw out of both of those guys. And, I don't think we're going to see anything like that again. But the games are great. And the pitching, I think, is legit. Justin Hageman looked terrific yesterday. The starting pitching, terrific as well. I think the final tally was 24 of the 27 innings. The Woo Sox held the Iron Pigs scoreless. So, that's the starting rotation, obviously, and it's the bullpen. And we saw a lot of different guys contribute to that. So, The pitching I thought was the headline for me, but then in terms of the position players and the offense, Romy Gonzalez. I don't know how you don't come away impressed after that weekend. And, I think I said it yesterday that if WooSox fans, Red Sox fans out there aren't familiar with his name, they got to be pretty soon, because if he continues to perform the way that he did this weekend, again, it's 3 games, it's a small sample size, but it seems like he's healthy, which he hasn't been the last couple of years. But when he has been healthy, that dynamic duo of his power and his speed, it's impressive. And we saw the power to the opposite field, saw him play some different positions. So I think he was definitely the big takeaway for me in terms of the positional players. But overall, I thought it was a really, really good weekend and a good way to start off the season for the Woo Sox.
Yeah, and I think your point on Romy is like a great example of a guy that's he's already on the 40-man roster, easily can go up if needed. And did he? I haven't looked at. I didn't look at the box score for all 3 days, but did he play a different position every single game?
Yeah, that was another thing too that really stood out, Andrew, is that, and we heard it from Chad Tracy on Friday, was that like versatility is going to be a big thing. And I think, it's not only with this team, but I think you see it in the major leagues too. Like we go back to last year and Bobby Dahlbeck, right, started playing in the outfield just to give himself the best chance and put himself in the best position possible to warrant a big league call up. I think you're going to see a lot of that with a lot of different guys. Romy Gonzalez, yeah, we saw him at shortstop, second base, and I think he played first base. It was 3 different positions for him, but we saw the same thing with Jamie Westbrook. Even he played first base on Saturday. It was the second time in his professional career, first time in 10 years, he played first base. We've normally seen him as a middle infielder last couple of years, Real Riders a year ago. Even Nick Sogard, talking to him over the weekend, the first 2 games of the season, right field, left field. And this is a guy who last year was voted the best defensive second baseman in Baseball America's Best Tools survey towards the tail end of last year. And I think if you were to ask him and anybody that's watched him play, you'd say defensively, he's most valuable at one of those middle infield spots. But I think it just speaks to the theme of this team that they're going to be a lot of different guys playing a lot of different positions. And I think I made the joke on the air yesterday. It's like that quote from Forrest Gump's mom, where he says, "Life's like a box of chocolates," or I should say, she says, "Life's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get." I think that's going to be the case when we go down into the WooSox clubhouse on a daily basis and look at that lineup. I guarantee you, it's not going to be the same in terms of positions on a day-to-day basis. Guys are going to be moving around all over the place.
I do feel like it's a very different dynamic than last year's team, because I feel like last year's team, you obviously had Ryan Fitzgerald on last year's team that played everywhere. You also had Sogard that played everywhere. But for the most part, I mean, then you had Bobby like playing a couple different positions. But for the most part, you had like, Narciso Crook and Palkas and all those guys that were going to play the outfield. Then you had like I'm totally drawing a blank on the infield last year. Well, you had like David Hamilton and Manuel Valdez in the middle infield, and it's like you knew that they were going to probably play there. I don't know. I just feel like you're right. It's like completely different. I have a totally different vibe. I was also like super impressed with, you mentioned it earlier, the starting pitching. I know there's been a lot of talk about the starting pitching so far in Boston out on the West Coast, and that all the starters are giving you almost quality starts every night, which is going to help the team tremendously. I feel the same way with the Woo Sox. Like I feel like Grant Gambrell and Brian Van Bell both obviously were on the team last year, came back and they put up good outings, and then the new guy Jason Alexander like had the 1 home run he gave up in the game, and other than that he looked pretty good. I know he only went like 4 innings, but what did you think though of like what you saw from Gambrell and Van Bell coming back in year 2 with the Woo Sox?
I think Gambrell, he impressed me last year. I know it was only 2 starts, Andrew, but in those 2 starts, he went 5 innings. One of those starts was against the Norfolk team that we talked about earlier, and he shut them down. And he tied, I think, a career high with 9 punchouts in that game, if I'm not mistaken. So a small sample size last year, but it was like, okay, this guy might be legit. And then he missed the last couple of weeks with that arm injury, but back healthy now. And I think he just exuded confidence to me on Friday night. And again, I know it was only 4 innings, but you're at a point where you're just building guys up, right? And you're coming back from the warm climate of Fort Myers and now transitioning up to this colder climate in the Northeast. And, you're trying to be careful with guys. But I thought he threw the ball very well on Friday night. And then Brian Van Bell, I point to the confidence, saw a lot of that from Van Bell on Saturday. He told us over the weekend that he just recently added a sweeper into his mix. And we saw a bit of it second time through the order, I would say, after he established the zone with the fastball, which isn't overpowering, but then his devastating changeup, which last year generated a ton of whiffs. And we saw a lot of that again on Saturday. Go back to Gambrell, though. I would say both Gambrell and Van Bell, I think, thanks to the new StatCast data we have at AAA, I think they both ended up with the second most whiffs among AAA pitchers on both Friday and Saturday. At least
Yep.
Gambrell was second. So what's interesting about that, and then even Alexander on Sunday, neither of those three guys are overpowering, right? I mean, they're going to top out about 91, 92 at best. And when you look at, even the Red Sox, right? Obviously, Brian Bale on Thursday, he was touching 97, 98, and Pavetta can get it up there too. But, it almost seems like the whole buzz of Craig Breslow, Justin Willard, and Andrew Bailey, what they've done with the pitching development program, where you don't necessarily need to be overpowering. I know that's the name of the game these days, Andrew, right? With pitching is velocity. But look at Garrett Whitlock, what he did yesterday with the bullet slider, gyro slider, whatever the heck you want to call it. But, it just seemed like, especially Whitlock yesterday and throughout that weekend in Seattle too, that they were trying to keep guys off balance with their secondary stuff. And I think you saw a lot of that too with the WooSox and Lehigh Valley over the weekend. So I think it all stems back to that whole pitching program thing we've heard a lot about, right? And look, they're very confident in what they're trying to implement here, and they really think that they can get a lot out of, especially the Whitlocks and the Houks. They want to see what those guys could do in a starting role. But it's not only that. I think it trickles down all the way throughout the system. I mean, obviously they've worked with Gambrell, Van Bell, a lot of these guys in AAA, right? So they're all, or in spring training, I should say. So, I think being around that for the last couple of months down in Fort Myers, I don't know how you cannot draw a correlation between what they're trying to do in Boston versus what you're seeing here. It's an organizational wide thing, in my opinion.
No, I agree with you. And I had the chance, and I know you brought up Justin Hageman's name. I talked to him in media day, and I did ask him that question of like, how has the new pitching structure affected you? Like, obviously, you're not on the 40-man roster, you're not in Boston, but like, how has it affected you? And he even went as far as saying that, like, the drive line way of thinking. I know AJ Politi talked about it too a little bit, but it's like he would get input from Andrew Bailey because he had an NRI to camp. So he would get input from Andrew Bailey. He would get input from Justin Willard. There was another name that I'm not sure of, and all those guys would send them all of the data that they had on his stuff during the spring training outings. And he had talked about it. He's like, hey, I started throwing a cutter last year, and they were just like, throw that more often. So he started throwing it more often. The velocity ticked up. He started getting like a ton of swing and misses on it in spring training. I think he went like his first like 8 outings in spring training scoreless. So, and then he did that 9 up, 9 down in Lehigh Valley, which was incredible to listen to. I didn't get to watch it, but my thing is like, it is interesting to hear about like guys like that. Like you said, Hageman's not a guy either that's going to blow you away with 99 on the gun. Like he's still creating swing and misses with like 93, 94 mile per hour stuff. So I think it's that might lead into my next question actually, is how, if we're already seeing some of the benefits from this, what do you think it'll look like by the end of the year? Like, do you think with guys that come up from AA, they've had, I guess, more development, and they had, I don't know, like longer time to buy in. I don't know if that's the right word, but what do you think when do you think we'll be seeing, I guess, more benefits from this?
It's a good question, Andrew. And, I think a lot of it is going to depend on health and just going back to the big leagues, especially the Houks and even the Crawfords of the world, right? I mean, the thing with Cutter Crawford was that, I remember seeing a graphic on one of the spring training broadcasts towards the tail end of March where I think it was after 75 or 80 pitches, the opponent OPS like skyrockets or something like that. So it's like trying to maintain that, which has been a focus of this program, but like keeping guys healthy too, I think is a big thing. And you talked about like double A. I think you talk to a lot of people around this sport, and double A, they really value the development at that level. I mean, years ago, like we saw, was it Andrew Benintendi skipped AAA altogether? Jan Moncada did too. I mean, there are some out there who don't necessarily believe in AAA, where it's like, all right, if you can master, for lack of a better word, double A, there's really not going to be that much of a difference between double A and triple A, as opposed to, high A to double A. So I think if you have to, to steal your phrase, like, people buying in longer, and the more time they're spending in this program, especially at a level like that, that's valued so highly universally, I think, across the sport, I think that's only going to benefit a team like Worcester, where, whether it's Wickham and Gonzalez or Luis Perales at some point maybe this year, or they hopefully will get their promotion, I think they'll be more closer to a finished product, I would think, as opposed to, not saying he wasn't, but just because he's top of mind, a guy like a Brian Van Bell from last year, who obviously pitched very well at double A over the first half of the season, and then a bit up and down a bit in the second half of the year, and definitely showed flashes of potential. But I think it's going to be, you won't, if it goes according to plan in the way that I think they want it to, and they get guys to buy in, I don't think you're going to see this huge adjustment period, when and if that time comes for these guys to eventually earn their promotions.
Yeah, it always it's interesting to think about because I remember listening to Craig Breslow talk at Red Sox winter weekend out in Springfield in January, and I think they had done a panel where people from the crowd can ask questions, and somebody I guess asked him a question along the lines of, you know, what is your main goal, like taking over, like what are you like focusing on like the most, what needs the most assistance in the Red Sox system, and I remember him saying like he developing pitching from inside the organization, like that's been a struggle in years past. Obviously, I think the last guy to, well, I guess now you have the Cutter Crawfords and the Houks and guys like that, but I think they just want a more steady line of it coming. So it is going to be interesting. And a guy that I'm high on in Double A that I hope takes this and runs with it is Hunter Dobbins. He added on a ton of weight over the offseason. I think he was listed at like 180 in the Portland. I think in Portland's like roster sheet, he was like 180 last year. He's 210 now. So it should help him get over the 150 innings limit that he wants to hit. But yeah, so that leads me into my next question. I don't know how. I know you're pretty up to date with Red Sox system, and you were at Fenway for what was that, like the prospect? I forgot what they called it.
The
The
rookie
development camp?
development program. Yeah.
Okay, so you were there, so you got to see all the guys that will obviously be up. There's been a ton of talk, obviously, about the big three, and I don't want to talk about them because I feel like a lot of people are. So I want one guy from you, or maybe you can even say a couple. Who are you most excited to see in person play that you get to call their game that's not the big three from Portland?
From Portland. Ah, gosh. You know, I would then go to the fourth guy, and I would say Nick York.
Should have left. I should have put him in that
Well,
grouping.
I think what's going to be interesting is now they're trying to see what he would look like in the outfield, right, at a corner outfield spot. And look, I mean, Nick York has been a guy that, he's not a guy who's going to hit 30 home runs, right? I don't think he profiles to be that guy. It's going to be interesting to see what they value him being in a corner outfield spot, if that's what his like final destination ends up being, because obviously his slash line and his projected power, it plays at second base, right? But obviously, you understand, because Marcelo Meyer is in the mix, Trevor Story is still here, and now you've got Von Grissom in the mix. So I understand the reasoning behind trying to move him around. So I'm curious to see, just from a defensive standpoint, makes me think of the scene in Moneyball with Brad Pitt where they go and visit Chris Pratt, aka Scott Hatterberg, and he's
Yeah.
like, "No, first base isn't hard. Tell him, Wash. You know, it's extremely hard." Like I know that we talked about versatility and we're moving guys around. I get that, but I also go back to back in the day. I remember Blake Swihart when the Red Sox put him in the outfield. Um, I think there was a play at Fenway where he went sliding after a ball, and there's obviously not a lot of foul ground in left field down the line, and he messed up his ankle. And I would still tell you that that probably set him down the wrong path for the rest of his career.
Yeah.
Again, you get a guy that obviously the bat played as a catcher, right? But they were trying to find a spot for him at some point in the big leagues. So, obviously Nick York was a first round pick, right? And it kind of seems like the public perception is one of maybe a negative one around him. That just seems like what the vibe is, right? Out there. I don't know why, but I just wouldn't sleep on him. Obviously, he's put up numbers before. He has also struggled at the same time, but it's a big year for him. There's no question about that because there are people that aren't including an upper echelon of talent anymore. So I think it's a big year for him. I'm anxious to see what he does in the outfield and how that affects his game, both defensively, of course, but then obviously offensively. Um, I'm curious to see how that whole situation with Nick York plays out.
Yeah, I think he nailed it. It's you're gonna see how he plays in another position. Obviously, it's middle infield in Boston is pretty locked down for a little bit. So I'm always curious how that goes for guys like transitioning around. Like I remember watching Bobby Dahlbeck play right field last year in Worcester, and I watched him make a play off of the Worcester wall that I'm like, this guy looks like he's played out in right field like his entire life. I mean, obviously he had the arm. He's a third baseman, so I knew the arm was going to play. But the way he played it off the Worcester wall, I'm like, how many games this guy played in the outfield in his life? Like, so maybe York will surprise some people and be like, wow, this guy actually looks pretty good as a left fielder, wherever he's going to end up going. So,
Yeah, I
um,
think a lot of it, I think there are a couple of things at play, like especially in Bobby Dahlbeck's case. Number one, like these guys are all insanely good, right? Athletes, baseball players, they're tremendous. So, it's not a total surprise that they can make a switch like that. But, in Dahlbeck's case, eh, in his particular situation being last year 28, right? I think like
yeah,
he's doing everything he can to try to get back to the big leagues. Being the full-time first baseman for an entire season and then, things happen, whatever. He's doing whatever he can to get back there. And you kind of wonder if Nick York might have that same mindset where again, everyone's on social media. Everyone knows what the perception is out there, right? Where maybe he's kind of fallen out of some people's purview where does he put that pressure on himself? But also, like, does that then motivate him to try to be a really good defensive outfielder and again help his chances to, get promoted and put himself back in the fold?
well, I want to shift gears here towards because when we release this, it will be opening day for home opener. Sorry, not opening day, home opener for the WooSox. And I don't know if the whole week is going to be good. I know Tuesday the forecast is looking okay, but
It's
it's
improved. It definitely has improved.
it's also Worcester though, so it's probably going to
Yeah, that's
rain
true.
both days. But what kind of things should fans like? I guess now that the team's coming home, it's the first chance to see players. So, like, obviously, we're going to see Cooper Criswell on Tuesday. A guy like Richard Fitz that I'm super high on. He's scheduled to pitch Wednesday. As long as the rain or sleet or whatever the heck they're saying these days. So Richard Fitz is going to be there. So, like, what kind of things, I guess, just in regards to, let's just say the first 2 days, because who knows if the Thursday is going to get whatever, but what kind of things should fans be looking forward to? I know we talked about earlier, like the Romy Gonzalez, like the opening series, like, and how well he hit and how much power he has. But I guess just in regards to like a guy like Richard Fitz, who none of us have seen before, I would assume probably nobody unless you were watching games in Portland or Somerset last year. So, what kind of things are you excited to see from, I guess, him and Cooper Criswell?
Yeah, when you were asking me that previous question as to who, besides the big three, I was excited to see, and then you dropped the Portland disclaimer. I was gonna say Richard Fitz.
Oh, okay.
I you know, I think this kid's legit. He certainly looks the part. There's no question about that. And just from having talked to him a couple of times, he seems like a very easygoing dude and seems to embrace his not, spotlight, so to speak, because it's not like we're talking about an A-list celebrity like Taylor Swift. But, I think he understands like where he's at and where he fits into this whole thing. Um, so I think that's half the battle, number one. And number two, I think he's got great stuff. And, seeing what he did down in Arlington and then flying back up here, I know last week was kind of a whirlwind for him, but the dude looks the part. There's no question about that. And, if all goes well, I do think that he will get a chance at some point this year. If injuries or if there's an opportunity in the big leagues, I would think that if Richard Fitz is having a Richard Fitz kind of season, that he should get serious consideration. So I'm really excited to see him. I think WooSox fans are going to love Richard Fitz. And then Cooper Criswell, too. Seems like a very cool guy, very down to earth guy. Just from chatting with him last week and then in over the weekend in Lehigh Valley. Obviously, is one of the, now three major league free agent deals that the Red Sox handed out this offseason, right? So, that alone, I think, is going to make people not tune in, but I think pay attention and be like, okay, what's this guy got? So I'm excited to see what he has in store. I mean, this is a guy who's been around and he has some experience. So, and a guy that also has some moxie, I think, and has like some confidence. I know I've said that word a few different times, but it just seems like, just being around the team this weekend, there was a lot of that, especially on the pitching side of things. So, I don't know if this whole organization, the Red Sox, the WooSox, Sea Dogs, I don't know if like they were cooking up some sort of secret sauce down in Fort Myers with Andrew Bailey or what, but it seems like there's just some sort of like quiet confidence up and down this organization, especially on the pitching side, where they're like, okay, well, we've put in the work and we know a few things that you guys probably don't. So we can't wait to show it off. So, excited really to see both of them, just from the standpoint that, again, one of the major league free agent signings and both guys that really should at some point, because you're going to need them, get some sort of opportunity in the big leagues this year.
I want to ask you too, because you actually called this guy's games the past 2 years. Are you at all surprised about Greg Weissert and his nasty pitches? Because I see Pitching Ninja throwing out all of his pitches like every night he's been pitching in Boston. You got to see him when he was pitching for Scranton. Is it surprising to you at all about him being successful in the bigs?
No, because this dude he was a freak. And,
Yeah.
it was like, the equivalent of a Trevor Hoffman, Mariano Rivera, or Edwin Diaz before he blew out his knee. Like, for real, coming into games, it was like, all right, this guy's a lockdown closer. And the sweeper was just stupid. Like, if Pitching Ninja, yeah, I know he's got his hands full with major league pitchers, but just paying attention to AAA the last couple of years, like Greg Weissert would have been in, like, I don't know what the over under would have been in like Pitching Ninja clips of him with the Rail Riders, but maybe like 5.5 times a week or something. Like, that dude was nasty. And it doesn't surprise me one bit, honestly. I mean, obviously there's an adjustment, right, to major league hitters and whatnot, but it doesn't surprise me because this dude flat out dominated, it seemed like, every single time. Besides, I think the Steven Scott game, I think Weiser may have been on the mound for that. I could be wrong.
Oh yeah.
I have to go back and look at it, but it just seemed like, all right, game was over every time he came in. That dude was filthy.
Yeah, I think I saw Pitching Ninja calling an airbender or something. I don't know. They said his sweeper was in like a different category. So
That's a good one.
I love watching it. Like pitches like that. Like I used to love watching. I've been following Tanner Houck since college days, and watching watching him just like he did look like an airbender on the mound because it's just like his pitches move so much, and it's just like the horizontal break on some of his pitches are just like how do you hit that? Like
it's like a wiffle ball, man. It's like playing wiffle ball in the backyard and making it like spin and move in all these different directions.
Yeah.
Like, that's honestly what I think of whenever I see, like you just said, even Tanner Houck or this guy's breaking ball. It's disgusting.
Yeah, I'd like to say that, like, if I could get one talent and it's like actually, I'm gonna ask you this question later, so I'm not even gonna say it now. I have one last baseball question before I jump to some one-off questions before we let you go. But I want to know your thoughts on the catching situation in Worcester. And I've talked about this a little bit. I think I tweeted it out too that um, last year the catching situation compared to this year is like polar opposite. And that's not saying anything bad on Caleb Hamilton because I thought Caleb Hamilton was a great receiver. He was grade A pitch framer. But this year it just seems like they focus more on guys, and we haven't seen Roberto Perez yet, but obviously he's a Gold Glover. But I feel like they focused on catching depth that was very defensive minded. I don't think they really cared as much. And Nathan Hickey, I guess, is the exception. He's very offensive minded, but I guess with the veterans they brought in, very, very defensive first catchers. So, what do you think that will do to the pitching staff this year?
I think it's only going to help. And obviously, that was intentional. That was by design, doing what they did and bringing in a Mark Holsbury and Tyler Heineman. I mean, they went out and they acquired Tyler Heineman. I mean, it's not like he was a minor league free agent or an NRI or anything like that. I mean, like they sought him out from the New York Mets. So, I think it plays into the whole we're trying to get the most out of this pitching staff as we possibly can. And you're right, it's very different from last year's dynamic because, yeah, you had a Caleb Hamilton who was definitely more known for his defense than his offense. But Jorge Alfaro, I mean, that was you talk about an offensive minded catcher. I mean, that's just what he was. And the same can be said for Oso, Ronaldo Hernandez, and I know those guys, they put in a lot of work, especially Oso, seeing that on a daily basis, working on his receiving and whatnot. But that clearly was the intent, was to try to change up that catching group coming into this year. Um, but like you had said, it's guys who have been around and guys who are veterans. And I'm excited to see this whole Roberto Perez situation because obviously he didn't exercise the opt out. So I would think we're going to see him at some point here in Worcester, right? So, you add him into the mix, a Gold Glover, as you said. I think it's fascinating. It really is. It speaks to the importance that they're putting on developing these pitchers. Like they're all in. And you look at the catching position really across sport. I mean, that's kind of what it is, right? And kind of how it's been. So um it's very interesting, that's for sure. And we did see Nathan Hickey behind the plate once this weekend. I do think that they're going to have to try to find a way to get his bat in the lineup. I know last year we saw Steven Scott, move around a little bit once he got promoted to AAA. I mean, maybe you see a Nathan Hickey play a first base at some point or some other spot. I don't know, but when you hit a 435-foot tater to dead center at Coca-Cola Park, there aren't many. I've been for the past 4 years at Coca-Cola Park. There aren't many people who have hit home runs in that part of that ballpark. It is not an easy thing to do, and for that to be your first AAA home run, that was very impressive. So you're right. I mean, he's probably, I would say, the weakest, defensive one of the four. But that's really saying something because it's a very strong defensive unit. There's no question about that. So it's a totally different dynamic, but I do think it's really going to help this pitching staff. And I'm curious to see what it's going to look like for some of the returning guys, like a Justin Hageman. Obviously, worked well for him yesterday, but like an AJ Politi, a Zach Kelly, even, and seeing what he can do. And then the Brian Van Bells and the Grant Gambrells of the world. So I'm excited to see what it does for those guys, just because we saw them firsthand last year, and to see what working with those catchers is going to do in 2024.
Yeah, and that was no dig on Jorge Alfaro. I thought he was incredible in the clubhouse. I think a lot of the players liked him and looked up to him, but it is what it is. He's just an offensive catcher at the end of the day. All right, Jim. I have a speed run of questions before I let you go here, non-baseball
Yeah.
related. Um,
Okay.
let's see what you got. I need your favorite movie of all time.
Oh God. Favorite movie of all time. This could go like one of four ways. I am gonna go Dark Knight.
Okay. What's your favorite TV show of all time?
The Walking Dead.
Ooh, classic. Both of them classics. If you had a walkout song as a broadcaster, what would it be?
Oh, In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins. That's a layup, Andrew. Come on now. That was my walk up song in college. At the 3:17 mark, that is when it would start. And then I would dig into the box right as the drum solo was wrapping up. So, yeah, no doubt.
All right, this one might get you in trouble. I don't know. If there was one rule in minor league baseball that you could change, what would it be?
Oh, uh, hmm. If there was one rule that I could change, I'm going to stretch this one a little bit. So, as you may have noticed tuning in this weekend, these umpires now are mic'd up for
Yeah.
challenges over the weekend. I would extend that to just questionable plays. And by that, I mean helping out the broadcasters who are hundreds of feet away and have no idea what the hell is going on when an umpire does something or everyone starts walking off the field like it happened in the top of the first inning on Friday night. When the second out of the inning is caught in left field, and we're left to assume that I believe it was Chase Mydroth didn't retouch second on his way back, but we didn't know because we never got an explanation. And I know that my beloved colleague Jay Burnham, member of our WooSox broadcast crew, he's been tooting this horn for almost 2 decades now in his experience in the minor leagues. Mic up the umpires for everything, for everything. It's not only going to help us, but the fans too. I think that's first and foremost. You know, there are fans probably sitting there going, "What the heck is going on here?" So, mic up the umpires.
Yeah, I like it. And I do your call on Friday. I do remember that because you're just like, oh, well, they're walking off the field and it's like, we got to like tell you what happened after the break. Right. It's like, because you guys were left in the dark too. It's like, and all the fans in the stands were probably like, that just happened.
Got that right.
I'm with you. I'm with you. All right. Favorite athlete outside of baseball?
Whew. Favorite athlete outside of baseball? I would have to go with Kevin Garnett.
Okay. That's a solid one. Now, this one can be about yourself or it can be about one that you've ever seen before. What's the weirdest baseball superstition that you've had or that you've seen?
The weirdest baseball superstition I've had or have ever seen. Oh boy. That is a good question. You may have stumped me there, Andrew.
I've
Man.
gotten a lot of I feel like a lot of players that we have on here, guy always puts on his right sock first or something, or it's like, I don't know, it can be anything. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was when I played in my college days, I would say making sure, well, okay, so here's one. So, these guys now, they have their own helmets, but, when you're in high school, little league, college, it's just a big bag of helmets, right? So, making sure I had the same helmet was mine. Um,
okay.
Even like if there was a time where I ended up getting like two or three hits and it was like too big, didn't matter. Like it could have been this big. Like if it worked, it worked. So making sure I had the right helmet. Now that I've given some thought, that was definitely a weird. I would think that was a weird one that I probably had.
Yeah, I feel like I get a lot of like, like I said, one guy puts on his like right sock and shoe before his other one, and he's like, I've just done that since I was a kid, and I can't stop now. And it's like, all right, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Um, what is a guilty pleasure of Jim Cain?
Oh, a guilty pleasure, Jim Cain's. Oh my goodness. I would say edible cookie dough. Um, Incredible. I could probably douse a whole thing if given the opportunity. But I've got a wedding I'm going to this weekend, so I've been trying to cut back on the sweets. But now that I just said it, man, I could die for like a tub of that, like Toll House or Nestle cookie dough. Incredible.
Oh yeah, it's the Toll House, man. I don't know what they put in it, but it is incredible.
It's intoxicating.
Um, let's see here. I'm gonna ask that one. Actually, yeah, this is a question I wanted to ask you earlier. If you had the ability to do one of these traits that you can't do now, Would you rather? So you're gonna have three options here. You have to pick one. Would you rather be able to dunk a basketball every time you step on a basketball court? Would you rather shoot a 77 on the golf course consistently? Or would you rather be able to throw just a nasty Greg Weiser type pitch on the mound?
Wow, these are good questions, Andrew. Man, so like you could go a few different ways, right? Like, so my thinking is, I initially was going to say the golf because, like, with where I am now, like, I'm a
Yep.
horrible golfer. Like, I would love to be able to
Same.
do that in like my current like life. But like in La La Land, in a hypothetical, I would probably say baseball, just because in terms of like a financial situation, that'd probably put me in a pretty good one. But if you're looking at basketball, if you could do that, I mean that could also get you a bag as well. Oof, I'm just gonna go with the golf because I my in-laws are very good golfers, so I always like am the I'm the worst one of the bunch. So yeah, and I'm a very competitive person, and it just drives me bonkers that I can't keep up with them. So yeah, I'll go with the golf one.
I agree. I agree, man. I would love to know the feeling of being the best person in a golf group. Like I've never
Oh
been the
no.
guy that shot the lowest. Like I want to shoot the lowest like one day. Like, and if I could shoot a 75, 77, oh man.
I'd be on cloud
Um,
nine for like a month.
oh yeah. I would be telling everybody about it. Just like when I heard like Tyler Murray saying something about a hole in one last year or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'd be just like that.
you could milk
Um,
that for a long time.
I got two questions left for you, both food related, and I'll let you slide. What's the worst topping to put on a pizza?
Pineapple.
Ooh, that's controversial there.
I never had it, but like I just don't. I don't get it. I don't get it. Doesn't
Controversial
entice
enough.
me.
Um, I've asked this last question to every single person that's on this show, and I hope you don't know what it is. And I need to know, what is your go-to fast food fried chicken place? Everything is available in it's got to have a drive-through, so you can't like it's not like a sit-down place. Where are you going if you could go to one?
Okay. Fast food in general or fast food fried chicken?
Fast food fried chicken.
Okay. Oh, gosh. I would have to go with God damn man. You know what? I would say at this point, I would probably say, and I think it has a drive-through, but I don't know. So correct me if I'm wrong. I've got to back up. Raising Cane.
Yeah, it's got a drive-through.
Okay. All right.
Raising
I had
Cane's
my
is
first
incredible.
Well, I had my first Raising Cane's experience when we were in Georgia, in Gwinnett last year. And it was a life-changing experience. My dad came down for a few days on the trip, and he had been. There's one, I believe it's in Methuen, Mass, and they're starting to
Yeah.
open up some more locations. And there's one that's opening up in Saugus, which is the closest one to me. And what's funny is that there's also the OG one around here. I think is on Com Ave by BU.
Yeah.
I went there, and I went to Emerson, so I was close by. But it was it was legit. And he was like, Jim, we got to go like for lunch one day. It's incredible. I was like, okay, sure thing, Dad. And Mr. Cain was right. It was incredible, and I am looking forward to them opening up around here because I will definitely be a frequent customer. There's no question about it. I mean, it was phenomenal, phenomenal.
Yeah, I've had a lot of players that come on here. A lot of them are from the South, and it's a big topic. And obviously, Zaxby's was the correct answer, but Canes is a close second. I enjoy it. They just put one in Marlboro. They just put that one in
Right.
Methuen that just went up.
Hmm.
Yeah, they're popping up all over, and I appreciate that Mass is finally getting on board. But
Yeah.
Jim, I appreciate you hopping on. I know it's your only off day of calling games, so like I said, I appreciate you giving me 40 minutes of your time on your off night. But we'll be opening day. The day this comes out will be opening day. If you listen to it before the game, then here you go. If you haven't and you waited till after the game, well, you'll still be able to catch Jim all week in the broadcast booth. But Jim, I appreciate all the time and thank you for hopping on.
Of course, and happy to do it. It was wonderful. I'm glad that I was so honored to be a guest here, and it was fun, man. Absolutely.